Coming up on show 540, we mop up some more Tesla news after earnings call, automakers in California do a deal, and we ride an electric bike for the very first time. Also talking Tesla roadside assistance, more battery news from South Korea, another challenge for the Volkswagen ID.R, and mate, your EV's a milk float. But this time it genuinely is. Well, good morning, good afternoon and good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to EV News Daily, Friday 26th of July edition. My name's Martin Lee. This is what you missed in the last 24 hours. 4 automakers from 3 continents have done a deal with California to produce more fuel-efficient cars for their US fleets in coming years, undercutting one of the Trump administration's most aggressive climate policy rollbacks, says the Washington Post today. Well, the compromise between the California Air Resources Board, CARB, and Ford, Honda, VW and BMW came after weeks of secret negotiations and could shape the future of US vehicle production, even as the White House officials aim to relax gas mileage standards for the nation's cars, the pickup trucks and the SUVs that you buy. The deal comes as the Trump administration is working to finalize a huge regulatory rollback that would freeze mileage requirements for cars and light trucks next fall at about 37 miles per gallon on average, rather than raising them over time to 51 miles per gallon to 2025 model years, the level that the industry and government agreed during the Obama administration. Well, the rule would also revoke California's long-standing authority to set its own rules under the Clean Air Act. That's a practice the federal government has sanctioned for decades. More on this Washington Post story in the link that I'll put in the show notes. Well, the group of automakers have released a joint statement. That's Honda, BMW, Volkswagen and Ford. They said these terms will provide our companies much needed regulatory certainty by allowing us to meet both federal and state requirements with a single national fleet, avoiding a patchwork of regulations while continuing to ensure meaningful greenhouse gas emissions reductions. That would be the worst thing, wouldn't it? For automakers having different sets of standards. One federal government set, one individual areas setting. And when California, who, by the way, might lose their right to set their own clean air, that's not going to go without a fight, though. If California do one thing, the rest of the US really has to follow. And in many ways, the rest of the world has to follow. If Europe and California do something, and you could argue these days China, it's just worth making that car for the worldwide market. Why California's influence, though, and how big is California economically in terms of their car market as well? Well, from a May 2018 CBS report, California now has the world's 5th largest economy. California's economy has surpassed that of the United Kingdom to become the world's fifth largest economy, according to new federal data made public. California's gross domestic product rose by $127 billion year on year, surpassing $2.7 trillion, according to the new data. And do Californians like EVs? You betcha. And they also penalise gas guzzlers as well. From an April 2019 article on Markets Insider, as of April 15 earlier this year, the average price of regular gas in Los Angeles reached $4.06 a gallon. It was the first time in more than 4 years that prices in Los Angeles surpassed the $4 mark, according to the LA Times. California is the only state with an overall average gas price above $4, while only 5 other states have a price more than $3. That shows how far ahead California is in their gas prices. Hawaii is the next average at $3.60 a gallon, according to AAA. I'm going to pop links to Washington Post and Markets Insider in the show notes for you. Well, we're taking a ride on the Zero SRF for the very first time. I'm not, but Sabrina at rideapart.com is. I do know, by the way, some insider information. If you like your bikes, rideapart.com are launching their very own podcast in the next few days. Looking forward to hearing that. But getting back to rideapart.com, talking about their electric motorcycle experiences, Sabrina says, holy smokes, is this bike fun to ride. It uses an amped up electric motor, like the pun there, called the Z-Force 7510. That's the motor in the Zero Motorcycles SRF. 110 horsepower on a lightweight bike. 140 pound-feet of torque and a top speed of 124 miles an hour. That's all coming from a 14.4 kilowatt-hour battery. Well, the acceleration is bonkers, says Sabrina, and doing it all in complete silence is the weirdest experience. Whether you're taking off from a stop or accelerating on the highway, all the power is available instantly at the twist of a throttle, and it is described as being mind-blowing. I knew it was to be expected, but I'm still enthusing about it, she says. That being said, I partly rely on the sound of the engine to make my presence known to other road users. Zipping around in complete silence like a ninja can be daunting. Keep in mind that you need to adapt to the fact that you're now truly invisible. As a biker, not only do drivers not see you, now they don't hear you, this is something to be aware of. Yeah, I drive in London a fair bit at the moment, and if I'm on a two-way road in London, which is crawling traffic 4-5 miles an hour, it makes total sense to be in an EV car. But even then, if my windows are closed, aircon on, got a podcast playing, I don't hear a bike. Now, a bike can be revving its engine, but modern bikes are so quiet, then I don't always hear a bike until it's right next to me. And you know, if you're changing lanes, you really have got to be looking in your mirrors. I see so much bad driving from car drivers. I see plenty of bad driving from bike riders as well, but at least in a car, you're not going to end up on the deck if there's an accident. And so I see plenty of good riders as well, by the way, and good drivers. But yeah, it's one of those things that bikers do rely on the sound of the engine. And so with an EV bike, something else to consider. Look, we can all just try and be better at being on the road and more considerate to other road users as well. So if you're on a bike and there's a 2-lane road of traffic crawling at 4-5 miles an hour, you know, you could crawl down the middle of it with maybe your hazard lights on or just being careful. Or like some bikers I can see, they just fly down the middle of the traffic. Well, look, there's cyclists, people step out, people cross the road, people change lanes. So you can be sensible about this, can't you? Thank you, as always, to MyEV.com for helping make this show. MyEV is the world's first marketplace for buying and selling and learning about EVs as well. It is a marketplace that connects buyers and sellers in a safe and secure way as well. If you're finding your next car, you just pick the make that you want. Okay, I'll do Renault, and you do the model that you want. Okay, I'll do Zoe then, but oh, actually, this is USA only, so it's not going to show any cars because you can't buy the Renault Zoe in the US. Check it out, myev.com. Hey, I got 2 new patron supporters of the podcast. I'm going to thank you guys in just a moment. On with the news, and Tesla is going to produce more than 100,000 cars a quarter from now on. The second quarter was a record one for Tesla with 95,356 deliveries. If you look at that in what we call H1, the first half of the year, the first 6 months of the year, that is 158,356 deliveries. There are signs that it was the last quarter that Tesla will ever have below 100,000 deliveries, though. Well, the Model 3 currently represents more than 80% of total Tesla car sales, and it's one of the reasons why the S and the X sales are maybe just diminished slightly. A bit of cannibalization there, but on that earnings call, Elon and the team on the call did say that whilst they've looked into this, there are some signs that the Model 3 is cannibalizing S and X a little bit, but not entirely. According to InsideEVs.com, Tesla sticks to its previous car sales guidance of between 360 and 400,000 cars made this year. They are confident that at the current production numbers, they will hit that guidance. Well, if they've delivered so far almost 160,000 cars, that does mean that this quarter and next quarter has to be at least 100,000 cars per quarter. And they were confident at reiterating that guidance. So that is this quarter we're in, and next quarter as well, over 100,000 cars delivered. According to Tesla, the Fremont production plant can, well, it not produce. This is because Inside EV says that it can produce 7,000 Model 3s a week. I would take issue with their excellent, always excellent writing. That's not what Tesla said. Tesla said that the Fremont facility on the Model 3 production line, the parts of that production line have individually shown the capability of producing 7,000 Model 3s a week when needed. So there is a peak rate, a burst rate, if you like, from the various parts that put together on that production line. They could, if needed, make 7,000 of those bits in the production line. It doesn't mean that that whole production line can operate at a peak of 7,000, or indeed that it is. So the detail's always in the words. If you read that sentence in the report and you listen to that earnings call like I have done a few times now, the details in there. They didn't say it can do it. It said that the individual parts of the line are each able to make up to 7,000. By the end of this year, the combined production output of S3 and X could well be 10,000 a week. That's 500,000 a year. And 500,000 a year is what that factory ultimately produced before Tesla moved into it all those years ago. I think the peak rate was about 500,000 cars came out of that facility in 1 year when it was the old NUMMI plant. So they might well get there again, and they might well do it between July 1st, we've just had, 26 days ago, and June 31st next year. That 12-month period could be what makes 500,000 cars. Well, Tesla's starting to roll out a new update that allows owners to request roadside assistance directly through the Tesla mobile app, according to Electric. After launching the ability to make a service appointment from the app and launching a new live service statement, a status update through its mobile app, Tesla is taking away the ability for customers to call their local service centre directly. Well, now Tesla's doubling down on service through the app with the launch of a roadside assistance program directly through the app. Owners started seeing the feature appear in their app recently. Previously, you had to call assistance and talk to an agent about your issue and tell them where you are. The automaker now, though, can initiate the service with simply the app opening. Are we surprised? No, Tesla is a Silicon Valley tech company. Elon is a Silicon Valley guy. Are we surprised they're trying to get away from having to pick up a telephone and call somebody? Do it all on the app? No. We can expect to see a lot more of that kind of thing. Thank you so much to 2 new patrons of the podcast. This show is funded by you. You make this happen. Thank you very much if you have signed on over recent days and weeks and months as well. Most recent producer of the show is you, Chris Williams. I've got 2 new producers of this podcast. Chris Williams, thank you very much for signing up on Patreon. And, well, I'm probably going to say your name incorrectly. I think maybe it would be Guillaume Seguin. Guillaume, I think I might have got your name correct, but if it's Guillaume or Seguin with the accent on the E, I hope I've got that right. I hate getting people's name wrong. It really bugs me. It's a respect thing, isn't it? You want to get someone's... The most respectful thing you can do is to say someone's name correctly. Let me know if I can have another run up at that, and I will. You can support the show, by the way, going to patreon.com/EV News Daily. You don't have to. It's entirely optional. I make this show whatever. Let's talk about batteries. South Korean battery maker LG Chem said yesterday it had agreed to invest 500 billion yuan, that's about $424 million US dollars, to build a factory in South Korea that will produce cathode material for lithium-ion batteries, so not the cells themselves, according to Reuters. LG Chem plans to break ground in the city of Gumi in southeastern South Korea next year, the company said in a statement. Cathode production will start from late 2022. The company LG Chem is one of the leading EV battery makers in the world. Their clients include GM. You'll find their cells in the Bolts and Volkswagen as well. Quick lesson in battery chemistry for newcomers to the podcast and old-timers like me. That's always good to have a refresher. Cathodes in a lithium-ion battery. Well, the cathode is made up of lithium metal as well as a combination of other metals, things like nickel, cobalt, and manganese. They absorb the negatively charged electrons from the anode portion of the battery, that produces the energy. Well, the anode portion of lithium-ion batteries, typically graphite, by the way. I'm going to pop a link to the Reuters article in the show notes if you want to read more. If you love the Jaguar I-Pace and you think, oh, blimey, a Jaguar, they put a nice car together. Well, they design a nice car, but the car's actually put together not by Jaguar. They, let's say, hedged their bets on this one. They got a third-party company to actually make the car. Of course, it's got a Jaguar badge by all accounts. It's the Jaguar I-Pace, but it's actually made by a company called MAGNA. And MAGNA and BAIC Group have now signed a framework agreement covering their electrical vehicle manufacturing joint venture in Shenzhen in China. Marks a milestone of continued cooperation, says Green Car Congress. Well, a year ago, MAGNA and BJ EV announced they would be jointly engineering and building EVs for customers in China. Earlier this year in January, they celebrated the opening of a new engineering centre and a new test centre in Shenzhen. The first production of EVs, it's going to be the BJ EV ArcFox model, going to be available next year in 2020. The joint venture capable of offering EV contract manufacturing services to other customers, much like the Jaguar I-Pace is made under contract by MAGNA here in Europe. Well, the legendary hill climb of Pikes Peak, the famous Nürburgring Nordschleife, and the iconic Goodwood Festival of Speed. These are all places that have been conquered by EVs. And actually one EV in particular, the fully electric Volkswagen ID.R, holds the record at each of those motorsport venues. But that's not all. Now, the VW ID.R team have been looking around the world and they've been sticking pins in the map and they finally found somewhere else they want to go to. This time, China. And the VW ID.R is going to take on its next record attempt in September. At the beginning of the month, the ID.R is going to be setting a new record to go up Tianmen Mountain in China. The goal for the outing in the Far East is to set a milestone for EVs and in doing so, raise awareness in China of Volkswagen's e-strategy. They're not making any cars of any number, really, but they are making many records. If you want to find out more about this, I'm going to put a link to the Volkswagen press office newsroom that I got this story from in the show notes if you want to read more about it. By 2035, it's worth remembering that Volkswagen wants to have 50% of the cars they sell in China being electric cars. Little background on Tianmen then. Tianmen Shan Big Gate Road in China is really spectacular. It's a mountain road. It climbs up a 1,500 metre mountain. There's 99 corners. Most spectacular stretch of asphalt the ID.R will have gone up, by the way. Narrow, steep, winding. It's a real challenge, and it starts at 200 metres above sea level and it goes up a height of 1,300 metres, the so-called Heaven's Gate. The ID.R is going to do that in September, and never before has the mountain seen anything like this before, so it'll get a ton of publicity all around the world, particularly in China, of course, where people will be impressed at this EV record. Well, moving on to Tesla's autopilot capabilities, I'll call that, the stop sign, the traffic light recognition, if you like. Chances are it's already working if you have a Tesla. It's just operating in shadow mode. This is intriguing, considering that traffic light and stop sign recognition is already operating in shadow mode in Teslas. It's only going to be a matter of time before the features get rolled out into people who are part of the early access program. Once the capabilities are then refined, Tesla can take that step towards full self-driving, launching the robo-taxi service as well, says Simon at Teslarati. Tesla is yet to introduce all the capabilities of full self-driving. Their suite, they say, of technology will be feature complete, that's the phrase Elon likes to use, feature complete by the end of this year. During the Q2 earnings call, he added he expects full self-driving to be operational in China, though Europe is going to be an exception because of specific regulations. Now, Elon did address this. In Europe, certain autopilot features have even been rolled back, so people who have had cars like S's and X's for a while, actually their car has got worse over time because it's been locked down by regulations. Elon was optimistic on the call. He said that none of these regulations are particularly troublesome to come across. It's just that those rules, those laws really were all agreed and signed so many years ago and just don't account for what Tesla's autopilot does now. So he doesn't see any massive hurdles to enable autopilot. It's just more of an admin job, he says, really. I'm going to link through to Teslarati in the show notes if you want to read more. A quick note on the show notes, by the way. I do have to make them smaller because the feed for this podcast... Quick digression, by the way. The feed for this show is getting too big. It's 14 megabytes, and apparently that's too big. And so it's a text file that serves all of the information about this show. And there are 540 episodes. And according to the experts, for me to get a plain text file to 14 meg is quite an achievement. And I do that because I put all of the show notes in all of the podcasts for you to see. So what I'll be doing going forward is I'll still be doing that. All of the show notes will be on my blog at evnewsdaily.com. Each podcast gets its own blog. However, in your podcast app or iTunes, Apple, Google, Spotify, I will simply put the URL for the story that I'm linking through to, and therefore it'll be a few characters long, not pages and pages long. But you can still get that by going to EV News Daily if you want to read more. There's that old joke about our EVs being milk floats. Well, this time they really are. Milk and More is the new name for the milkman, really, here in the UK. It's expanding its fleet of electric vehicles to more than 500 with the addition of 159 new LDV EV80 models, says Commercial Fleet website. Just like the classic electric milk floats, the new models will be used to provide silent and emission-free morning milk deliveries. Last year, Milk and More invested £6.5 million in 200 new electric vehicles, whereas these ones, the EV80s, well, they're going to provide 120-mile maximum range, actually, on a single charge, recharged in 90 minutes. The LDV vans, the EV80s, are made in China by SAIC and distributed in the UK by Harris Group. A second electric model, the EV30, will join the lineup next year. Is the milk float something that is unique to this country? I'd love to know from you, by the way. One of the great things about having a global audience for this podcast, it's about maybe 30-40% US and then about the same UK and then the same rest of the world. One of the things about it is I love hearing from you wherever you're listening. Is the milk float a uniquely UK thing? We used to have milk delivered to our doorsteps. Well, everyone did. Milk and dairy delivered to our doorstep by horse and cart. Then, when petrol milk floats came along, but then they went electric, right? So then milk floats were these little electric vehicles that would run on lots of car batteries underneath them. And we had them for years, right? And they were silent, didn't wake you up in the mornings. Then that went away and milk ended up going into supermarkets, selling it in larger quantities. Supermarkets drove the cost down, and the milkman sort of went away a little bit. And then they went to petrol cars. And before we moved into this house last year, we always got the milk bottles delivered because they were glass bottles. We tried to cut down on our plastic use, and so the milkman would come every morning about 4 a.m. in the summer. Our windows are open. It'd wake us up. It was a real pain. And you think, because you'd hear the van coming down the street, and we lived on a very, very quiet road. Moved into this house, we haven't set it up. So it's one of the things that we must do is set up our milkman. And then probably 3 times a week, it'd be nice if you had an electric one, wouldn't it? We'll get our milk delivered back on the doorstep in glass bottles that can be reused hundreds of times, and cutting down on our plastic use. A bit of milk, a bit of dairy. I'll get my Oatly milk and my soya milk as well, because I've cut down on my dairy too. They'll bring everything. They'll bring your whole shopping if they want, but that's what the milkman does these days. Moving on to our final story. Oh, so is it a unique thing, by the way, having milk brought to your door? Is that just a UK thing? The milk float? Is that just a... Anyway, let me know. You can email me anytime. hello@evnewsdaily.com. Final story today, and a Tesla owner, we don't condone this, by the way. A Tesla owner found his front bumper completely disassembled from the front of his car when he came back to it. It was a Model S, and the speculation is that it's because he was parked in a supercharging station, an indoor one in a car park, but hadn't plugged in. Says Electric. Some Tesla owners have been known to use a space at Tesla supercharging stations, not particularly ones outdoors in the middle of nowhere, but the ones that are indoors in convenient multi-storey car parks. They use the spot, but they don't plug the supercharger in. Not appreciated by the EV community. There's no way to incentivize people not to do it, by the way. However, in China, it looks like they take it seriously. Twitter user Jay in Shanghai, who is a Tesla owner himself, often updates us on the progress of Gigafactory, posted an image of this white Model 3. The front has been opened. The front bumper is completely off. And the speculation is that because this car was in the supercharging spot and not plugged in, that someone has vandalised it. That is perhaps a leap too far. Anything could have happened. Maybe the battery went flat and they had to try and get to the wires to open the frunk, and maybe they had to disassemble part of the car. Maybe somebody tried to tow the car and the bumper came off. Or maybe it was just vandalism from somebody who didn't appreciate the car not being plugged into a supercharger. But why would the frunk be open as well? It's super weird, but that's the story they went with. Look, that leads nicely on to I put that story last because our question of the week this week, which we'll answer on Sunday, is what's the most constructive way to stop a charging space being iced? But you could also say, what's the most constructive way to stop a charging space being used by someone who's in an EV and not plugged in just because they want to use the space near the door or they're just being lazy? Let's be constructive. Removing their bumper, their fender, is not the thing to do. You can email me hello@evnewsdaily.com or leave a comment on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you for 236 patrons of the podcasts. Thank you to Guillaume and also to our latest patron, Chris, as well, for keeping this show going. Thank you to Phil Roberts from Electric Future, our premium partner of the show, Brad Crosby as well, and the gang at Avid Technology. If you want to find out what it's all about, patreon.com/evnewsdaily. You can get all the new podcasts by subscribing either on your podcast app. You can listen online. There's YouTube, there's Spotify, Apple, Google, Stitcher, iHeart, TuneIn. If you've got your Tesla, we're on TuneIn. And, of course, on Patreon. If you can leave a little review for this show, that would be amazing. I've got some more reviews to bring you over the next couple of days. And if you want to catch up on the socials, search EV News Daily. Have a wonderful end of the week and start of the weekend. Got a brilliant interview to bring you this weekend. Look out for that on Saturday, and we'll answer your question of the week on Sunday. I'm on a road trip on Sunday. I will tell you more about that when I can. I mentioned on Twitter recently that I just felt that after having our EV with a smaller battery, we need something that goes further. And we've made a decision. And on Sunday, I've got a big road trip to do. I'll tell you more about that when I can. In the meantime, do have a wonderful day. I'll catch you soon. Remember, there is no such thing as a self-charging hybrid.